Yeah, welcome to the video that might break me. I first read this book on New Year's Day 3 years ago, 2022. And then I turned right back around and read it again a week later. One of my first videos on this channel was a love letter to this book. It's basically like several minutes of me just gushing over how much I love this. So I'm gonna keep that to a minimum. I love this book. At the time of my first read through, this became my very favorite book, which is such a kind of a strange thing to say. I think favorites are a bit of a silly thing to have in the art world. Stories vary so much from each other, and the places we're in when we read them vary so much, that I think favorites obviously are supposed to change and very naturally change. I just have so much love, I think, for the place I was in when I read this and what this did for me. I think this was one of the first queer books that I ever read. This book was there for me, you know, like a warm hug. Golly, I love this book. I really don't want to walk away from this feeling any less for this story. I don't think that I will, but I am kind of still scared that this won't be my favorite anymore. Now that I'm in a very different place in my life and I've read a lot more stories that I love, it's got some competition. I hope that it holds me as close as it did the first time. Today I will be reading out of the book that I bound. I made this little hardcover version. I made a video making this. It's kind of terrible. And it needs some WD-40, but the book is holding up, right? It looks good. I'm excited to read it out of here. I'm kind of gonna miss all of the annotations, kind of revisiting things that I annotated the first time, but that's okay. It's worth it. Shall we? This is how you lose the time war. Amal, El-Mohtar, and Max Gladstone. To you, P.S. Yes, you. I love letters. I love letters. I love letters. I'm remembering how absolutely confused I was in the first chapter. It just really, it drops you into everything, just immediately. It's so fascinating. The language is so peculiar, in a good way, like poetic, and it's like, just immediately, I'm not even through the first page, and I'm like, it's so good. The way that it's written, I just love it so much. Okay, I'm sorry, we're gonna keep going. Her clothing knits back together, red looks, again, something like a woman. I love that that's something that they point out, but I also love when you really get into it, you kind of forget that they have genders, you know? They just kind of become red and blue, and this is the love story between those two entities, you know? But at the same time, there's something so innately, there's a feminine nature to them both, I think, that I love as well. There's a lot of me that kind of wants to annotate it, because I feel like the things that I would mark today are very different than the things that I would have marked 3 years ago. And that just fascinates me. I told myself I wasn't going to mark in my hardcover. So full of character. It's so good. It feels so concise. It feels so tight, like in the best way. Like it gives you everything you need, nothing more and nothing less. Like there is no fat to this story. And sometimes that's all the more savory. Like it's a really powerful punch. It does kind of feel just as warm as it did the first time. It is enemies to lovers, but I think in more depth than that, it's these two beings that recognize themselves in each other. Maybe it's all subtext. Maybe it's the subtext that I love so very much. Jeez Louise, that was gorgeous. They pass among the dead under chandeliers of shoulder blades, rose windows outlined by rib cages. I love how we get to live like 100 different little lives. Like it's glimpses of tiny little worlds, which are really not tiny at all. I don't know, it's really cool. The amount of time that these two people are devoting to just communicating with each other is like, it's so doting, it's so touching. To find those who, when they ask, do I have you still, when they end a letter with yours, mean it in any substantive way. Oh shit. It's getting real, y'all. 74 pages in. It's interesting, there are things in here, there are sentences, phrases that feel way more amateur than I remember them feeling. But those sentences, those phrases are so few and far between, but they do stand out to me. But like 95% of it still reads so masterfully. I feel like I am putty in the palm of this book's hands. I feel owned by this book. I think I can recognize that it feels very personal, the reasons that this is such an important book to me. Like, I'm not sure it's any longer my favorite book in the sense that, forgive me, in the science of storytelling, in the science of writing. Like, I've read some books that just feel so masterful, so innately profound. And I don't think this is up there with that. I think it is up there, but there's so much in this book that just sings to me. I think maybe that's a factor that we don't take into account enough when we talk about our favorite books. As long as like it reaches inside you and it stirs the pot, you know, it takes hold of your heart and says, hey, remember this thing? You have one. But I'm only 74 pages in. I'm enjoying myself, but I have been taking notes of things that I want to go back and highlight. I wonder how much of the same stuff I underline, I highlight. I'm really, really curious. I read quite a bit last night. I read like 70 or 80 pages. So we are more than halfway through. I've been writing down so many things that I want to annotate. Also, I've decided that no, I don't want to annotate in this edition. I'm going to take all my notes and annotate them back in my original version. And that way I think we get to kind of better compare what I picked out this time versus what I picked out last time, the first time. We are starting today with page 143. Like 50 pages left? Is that right? I'm feeling kind of about the same as I did yesterday, but I'm curious to see if the ending gets to me today. Oh, also, last night I read something that was very inspiring. If you have seen the video where I bind this book, I talk about how I'm too scared to put something on the cover. First of all, because I think I would do a really bad job, but second of all, because I couldn't decide what I wanted to put on the cover. So I told myself I would read through it again and see if something stood out. Well, something stood out last night. At one point, Red sends Blue a real letter, like an actual letter. The whole time their letters have been, you know, kind of hidden in things, right? Red sends Blue like a real piece of paper in an envelope. And it describes this envelope as being like blue with a red dollop of wax on it. And I was like, that would be perfect. So that's been in the back of my mind. We're gonna sit on it. There were quite a few things in here that I'd forgotten about, so we're just gonna jump back in. Just now realizing that there's no chapter information at all. And it's kind of weird that I'm just now noticing that. It hasn't bothered me. Until now, obviously. Back to it. I'm excited. The yearning is real. It's so gay. Highlight a whole page. How do I highlight a whole page? That's so good. The twist of you and me, the writhe, your whip uncoiling in my veins, and I write between the rearing and the snap. Like... Oh, well. It's so good. Sorry, I'm sitting with it. The very ending feels like it gets a little distracted. It feels very different than the rest of the book does, and it's a little predictable, the very, very end. For me, like, the emotions climax well before the ending. The last letter that Red writes is like the height of emotion for me. Like, that's when I'm like feeling all the things. And then like the rest of the 20 pages are just kind of, you know, wrapping it up, and that makes sense. So I'll say it again. I have definitely read things that are more profound, that do more with their words, but I have not read a lot of stories that twists my insides the way that this does. It just crawls under my skin and lays its eggs. That's disgusting, I'm sorry, but like, there's something I love so much about the genre bending, about how this is sci-fi and there's action in it, but at the very heart of it, it's love letters and poetry. And there's something about the wonderful combination, the wonderful, beautiful dichotomy of those two things. And you would think that those two things would clash a little bit, but they kind of just, the way that these authors just kind of make those two things mold together sings to me. I recognize, like, I've had friends, I've recommended this, of course, and I've had friends read it, and they'll come back and they'll tell me, you know, like, I get it, it was good. It was good. And I'll be like, you know, that's fair. That's totally okay. It's not for everyone, but it's for me. But to answer the big question, I was really scared. I'm not gonna lie to you, I really thought this would not do it for me the way that it did before, and that I would have moved on. But you know what? You know what? I'm a little shocked. It thrills me to say that, yeah, this still did it for me. Yeah, this is my favorite book. I do have friends, and I have met people who have read this, and they're like, yeah, it's so freaking good. So we're out there, my little group of people. I love you. I really didn't think I'd be ending the video this way. But I'm like really kind of happy that I am. If you have read this book, maybe you love it as much as I do, please say something. Let your voice be heard by me so that I know I'm not crazy. And if you haven't read it and have decided maybe you want to give it a chance, please do. Yeah, I'm going to be sitting with that for a little while. Thanks for watching. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm all in a tizzy. I'm all romantic.